Fake HOA officers stormed Dale Winter's backyard and shut down his daughter's wedding, chaining the driveway and threatening guests. Led by a brazen scammer named Brewer, they terrorized the family on what should have been a joyful day. But one call from Dale's future son-in-law, a National Guard reservist, turned the tide in a way no one saw coming. And just wait until you hear how this stunning confrontation ended, with justice served for all to see. Dale Winters had poured his heart into this day. For months, every spare evening and weekend had gone toward transforming his Montgomery County backyard into a perfect wedding venue. His property stretched to the edge of a small, shimmering lake, a hidden gem where ducks swam lazily beneath overhanging willow branches. Emma, his only daughter, had dreamed of a simple outdoor ceremony here since she was a little girl. Now, at 27, she was marrying Kyle Preston, a young man Dale admired deeply, both for his kindness and his service in the Maryland National Guard. The guest list included family, old friends, and a proud contingent of Kyle's fellow guardsmen, many just back from deployments. It would be a wedding rich with love, patriotism, and community spirit. That Saturday morning dawned bright and cloudless, the kind of morning you remember forever. By 8 a.m., the tent company arrived, rolling out dozens of white folding chairs and setting up a billowing ivory canopy near the lakeside. The sound of hammers and laughter filled the air. Soon after, a florist's van pulled in, bringing fragrant garlands of sunflowers intertwined with red, white, and blue ribbons, Emma's special request to honor Kyle's service. Dale stood back and smiled. His wife Carol carefully unwrapped the family's antique cake topper, an heirloom passed down through 4 generations. The air buzzed with quiet joy and anticipation. Then, without warning, 2 black SUVs rolled to a stop at the foot of the driveway. The engines idled menacingly as 4 individuals stepped out, dressed in dark, tactical-style uniforms with HOA compliance patrol emblazoned in bold across their chests. Dale frowned. In 15 years living here, he had never seen anything like this. The real HOA rarely involved itself with private property, and certainly never sent patrols. A tall man with a crew cut and mirrored sunglasses strode forward. "You need to shut this event down, immediately," he ordered, voice sharp and practiced. Confused, Dale stepped toward him. "What are you talking about? This is my daughter's wedding." Without missing a beat, the man, who introduced himself only as Chief Officer Brewer, handed Dale a laminated document stamped "Emergency Cease and Desist." Dale scanned the page. It cited vague, official-sounding rules. Gatherings exceeding HOA-approved guest count limits. Unpermitted lakefront activity. Noise violations subject to enforcement action. The language was aggressive and obviously fabricated. "I have full approval from the county. Permits for everything," Dale said, his voice rising with disbelief. "This is private property, and my daughter's wedding." Brewer smirked. "County approval doesn't apply here. You're under HOA governance. You proceed. We'll start towing vehicles and issue $5,000 citations per violation." Alarm bells rang in Dale's head. This was a bluff, but a dangerously bold one. He instinctively reached for his phone to call the HOA board president, whom he knew personally. Before he could dial, one of the so-called officers stepped forward, blocking him with a heavy arm. At the same moment, another began loudly ordering the tent workers to stop what they were doing and start packing up. The stunned workers hesitated, looking to Dale for guidance. Inside the house, Emma, still in her robe, hair half curled, heard the commotion and rushed out onto the porch. She took in the scene, strangers in combat gear yelling at vendors, guests being stopped at the entrance by 2 more patrolmen, waving batons and gesturing for them to turn around. Emma's face crumpled. "Dad, what's happening?" she cried, tears spilling down her cheeks. Dale's stomach twisted. All the joy of the morning evaporated. Cars filled with elderly relatives and military guests were being turned away. The once bustling driveway now sat chained off, blocked by the fake patrol's SUVs. By noon, the beautiful wedding Dale had worked so hard to create was crumbling into chaos. His daughter, once glowing with happiness, now stood in tears on the porch, helpless. And for the first time in his life, Dale felt something far stronger than shock. He felt rage. Word spread through the arriving guests like wildfire. What had started as confusion now burned into collective outrage. Kyle's fellow guardsmen, young men and women trained to read a situation, picked up immediately that something was off. They quietly passed word among themselves. "This isn't right," Sergeant Eric Morales said to Dale, pulling him aside. "There's no such thing as an HOA compliance patrol in this county. I've seen the real HOA documentation. They don't have this kind of authority." Eric had served multiple deployments overseas. His instincts told him that these so-called enforcers weren't following any legitimate protocol. Their uniforms looked theatrical, not official. Tactical vests with cheap patches, no badges of legal authority. "But they're intimidating people, blocking the road, threatening to impound cars," Dale replied, voice tight with frustration. "The HOA office is closed today. I can't reach anyone to stop them." Brewer and his crew escalated fast. They chained off the main driveway entirely, padlocking it shut and parking one of their SUVs sideways to block entry. When Dale protested, Brewer's response was chilling. "You've been warned. If any guest or vendor attempts to cross this barrier, they will be forcibly removed. This is your final notice." Vendors panicked. The tent workers who had remained out of loyalty were now too intimidated to continue. The florist's assistant stood crying beside the half-decorated archway. Meanwhile, early guests arriving on foot were stopped at the edge of the property and told that unauthorized assembly was prohibited. Some elderly relatives, including Dale's sister, who used a walker, were photographed and turned away. Emma watched this unfold from the porch. In her wedding gown, veil trembling as her shoulders shook with sobs. "Dad," she whispered through tears, voice breaking. "I just wanted a simple wedding. Why is this happening to us?" Dale's heart twisted. It had taken everything in him to hold it together, to try and reason with these impostors, to shield Emma from the worst of it. But now, as he watched her cry on what should have been the happiest day of her life, something inside him shifted. A quiet voice from behind broke his grim thoughts. It was Mr. Travers, an elderly neighbor who had lived on the street longer than anyone. He leaned close and whispered, "I've seen that man before. Brewer. He runs a shady, so-called security company. Targets HOAs that don't have their own enforcement. Sends out these fake patrols to scare folks into paying made-up fines." Dale's eyes narrowed. "You're sure?" "Positive," Mr. Travers said gravely. "He tried it here a year ago, but the real board shut it down. Must have found a new way in." Now, everything made sense, and became far more infuriating. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't overzealous HOA enforcement. It was a deliberate scam, run by people preying on fear and confusion. Brewer and his team grew bolder. They began taking photos of every license plate they could see, calling out threats of civil penalties. Two of them approached a group of elderly guests sitting near the house and demanded that they leave the property immediately. One of Emma's great-aunts clutched Dale's arm, visibly shaking. By now, many guests were trapped, either too intimidated to enter or stuck inside, unsure whether they'd face harassment if they tried to leave. Dale stood frozen at the edge of the porch, fists clenched at his sides. The sight of Emma, radiant in her dress just an hour ago, now sitting alone in tears, her day stolen by frauds, ignited a fury he had never known. But just as his anger threatened to boil over, a steady voice cut through the tension. It was Kyle. Composed but ice-cold, he walked to Dale's side, pulled out his phone, and placed a single call to his commanding officer. His words were simple and deliberate. "Sir, we have an incident. Unauthorized individuals impersonating officers, blocking lawful assembly, and intimidating civilians at my fiancé's wedding. Request immediate guidance." Then he hung up and looked Dale in the eye. "Help is coming, sir. We're not letting this stand." For the first time in an hour, Dale exhaled, and hope flickered to life. 20 minutes had never felt longer. Dale stood on the porch, shoulders squared, watching the chained driveway. Emma sat just behind him, wiping her face, her gown creased and veil damp with tears. Across the lawn, Brewer's fake officers prowled with growing boldness, pacing, shouting into radios that likely weren't connected to anything real. Then, the sound of engines, low, steady, multiple. From the winding county road came a convoy, not of cars, but of unmistakable military vehicles. Olive-drab Humvees, transport trucks, and several guard SUVs rolled into view, their presence commanding immediate attention. The National Guard had arrived. Inside the lead vehicle sat Lieutenant Colonel David Harris, Kyle's commanding officer. Kyle's urgent call had briefed him mid-transit, and he had rerouted the entire Guard contingent scheduled to attend the wedding. Brewer's reaction was instant and desperate. He and 2 of his men hurried to the chained driveway, waving arms and shouting, "Private property! You have no jurisdiction here! Stop now!" One man even called out that any guardsman who crossed would be detained under HOA enforcement. It was a spectacular miscalculation. Colonel Harris calmly exited his vehicle, adjusting his uniform jacket as he approached the makeshift blockade. Standing tall, with the authority of decades of service in his voice, he addressed Brewer directly. "This is an illegal blockade. You are impersonating officers, trespassing on private property, and obstructing a lawful assembly." Brewer blustered, insisting they had jurisdiction under HOA emergency compliance. Harris showed no reaction, only a thin, controlled smile. Turning to his unit, he issued crisp orders. Document everything, establish evidence chain, notify county sheriff and federal liaison, impersonation of law enforcement suspected. Immediately, 2 guardsmen began recording on high-resolution body cameras. Another pair began making calls to the sheriff's department and appropriate federal contacts. Meanwhile, other members of the unit quietly moved into position, flanking the so-called officers. They moved with practiced precision, calm, respectful, but immovable. 2 soldiers unchained the driveway with deliberate ease. The fake patrol members shouted in protest, but no one stopped them. Guests who had been trapped outside began arriving on foot and by car. Tent crews and florists hurried in to reset what they could. Vendors, emboldened by the guards' presence, returned to their tasks. Inside the house, Emma peered through the front window. Her breath caught, and then came a sound she hadn't heard all day: cheers. A wave of applause and shouts of relief rolled up the driveway as guests and guardsmen restored order. Dale, standing by the door, felt Carol squeeze his hand tightly. His fury, once a white-hot storm, now pulsed with something stronger: hope. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Moments later, county sheriff's deputies arrived in force, lights flashing. Colonel Harris calmly briefed them, showing video evidence and detailing Brewer's false claims and illegal actions. The deputies wasted no time. After verifying the facts and seeing the footage, they moved swiftly. Brewer and his team were arrested on the spot. Charges included impersonating law enforcement, trespassing, harassment, and unlawful restraint of private activity. As the handcuffs clicked into place, a wave of spontaneous applause erupted among the wedding guests. Emma, eyes still shining with tears, but this time joyful, leaned toward her father and whispered, "Dad, they're gone." Dale wrapped an arm around her shoulders, heart full. The day wasn't ruined, it was reclaimed, and the battle was far from over. But for the first time that day, justice had stood tall. The sun hung low in the sky when the final SUV carrying Brewer and his men disappeared down the road, flanked by sheriff's cruisers. For a long moment the front yard stood still, as if everyone was catching their breath. Then one voice broke the silence. "Let's have a wedding." It was Kyle, standing tall, uniform jacket off, sleeves rolled to his elbows. His words ignited a ripple of cheers. The National Guard members who had responded so swiftly to their friend's call stayed. They moved tables, reset chairs, and helped rebuild the once disrupted ceremony space. Vendors returned. The florist, eyes still bright with emotion, hurried to remake Emma's bouquet. A new cake arrived, courtesy of a local bakery owner who'd heard what happened and rushed a replacement without charge. Neighbors appeared from their homes with extra lights, folding chairs, even desserts. The whole community seemed to rally around the Winters family. As the last rays of sunlight painted the lake in gold, Emma stood once more at the head of the aisle, her arm linked through her father's. When the music swelled and the two began walking, every guest rose in a standing ovation. Tears glistened in Dale's eyes as he guided his daughter toward her waiting groom. Gone was the fear, the frustration. What remained was joy, hard-won and deeply felt. The ceremony was simple, heartfelt, and more powerful than anyone could have imagined. At the reception beneath the twinkling lights, Lieutenant Colonel Harris raised a glass. His words were brief but unforgettable. "Let today be a lesson. No bully, no fraud, no imposter can steal your joy when good people stand together." Applause thundered through the crowd, and the story didn't end there. Within hours, video of the incident spread online, first through guests' social media, then through local news outlets. Footage of the fake officers being arrested went viral across the county. The next morning, headlines told the story, "Fake HOA patrol busted at wedding. National Guard steps in." Investigators swiftly shut down Brewer's fraudulent operation. He now faced multiple federal charges, and authorities uncovered a web of similar scams across several neighborhoods. For Dale, the aftermath brought a wave of unexpected support. Messages poured in from neighbors and complete strangers. Congratulations, gratitude, and outrage on his family's behalf. But all that mattered to him was the moment he would never forget. Watching his daughter dance beneath the stars, laughter in her voice, surrounded by family, friends, and the very guardsmen who had stood up for her. Emma danced well into the night, her joy restored, and Dale, standing with Carol at the edge of the dance floor, watched her twirl and smile with a heart full to bursting. One thought echoed through him as the music played on: justice had been served, and this wedding would be remembered forever.